Wow, that was dramatic. What just happened?
Dan, all morning, Tommy Robinson's lawyers and the government's lawyers have been sparring about his treatment in prison. And one of the things they're debating about is, does he get privileges like phone privileges, visitors? And there was some dispute. So there was a moment there when Tommy, who was joining by video link, waved to get the attention of the court to signal that the government lawyer wasn't accurately reporting the facts. So the judge said, okay, we're going to have a short break where Tommy can phone his lawyers to instruct them. Tommy wasn't going to give evidence directly, but he could say things to the lawyer. But in the middle of that phone call, the prison governor hung up the phone, canceled the call, and Tommy Robinson came back and wrote a piece of paper and held it up to the video link saying, I was cut off. And the judge said, is this true? And the Judge Martin Chamberlain said to the government's lawyer, Mr. Cross, you call that prison governor and you get that phone call going right now. And you tell the prison governor not to cut it off until Tommy and his lawyer are done talking. I mean, this judge is very even-keeled. It's tough to read this judge. But when the prison governor cut off Tommy's call, I think that irritated the judge because it delayed things. And here's the reason I think that's an important moment, Dan. It sort of proved that the prison was taking liberties, that the prison was cutting corners, that when the prison says Tommy has certain privileges, well, maybe or maybe not. Of all the things said this morning, I mean, I think Alistair Williamson, the lawyer for Tommy, he's an excellent King's Counsel. I love listening to him myself. But I think perhaps the most persuasive moment was for the judge to witness firsthand the whimsical, capricious, and perhaps even abusive nature of the prison. Amazing.
Well, especially because up until that point, the KC for the Secretary of State had been saying, Tommy gets contact all the time, there are people in there all the time. He couldn't even get the attention of a prison guard during the trial. And that second note he held up actually made the point that all his calls are monitored and that they would have been monitoring that call with his lawyers live.
Very interesting, and I believe that. Other things that the Secretary of State, that's the government's lawyer, was saying, I know from personal experience are not true. I know you visited Tommy, and I visited Tommy once, but my subsequent visits, one of them was approved, and then at the last minute was cut off by the prison. So is that what the Secretary of State, what the government means by Tommy has visiting privileges? For a while there, Tommy's own son was cut off from phone privileges. There's a lot of liberties being taken. And there's a certain cruelty there. And listen, Tommy's been in solitary for about 150 days. It's not meant to be that way, Dan. And listen, I'm not saying Tommy is going to win. It feels like it's on a knife's edge here.
It does.
And we've got about an hour right now. But I think Tommy's got a shot. And remember what's being decided today. Not the substance of Tommy's complaint, but the scheduling question. Has Tommy proved to the judge that things are urgent enough and emergency enough to have a speedy hearing? So today is not the final disposition of should Tommy be in solitary. Today is a judge saying, is this something we should fast track because it's really urgent? And I think the strongest piece of evidence that Tommy's lawyer, Alistair Williamson, presented was a detailed psychological evaluation by a mental health professional sent in to examine Tommy, and talking about his PTSD, his ADHD, how some of it is from his last stay in solitary confinement, how that is affecting Tommy's mindset. I won't try and repeat exactly what the doctor said, but it was pretty persuasive.
Yes, it was.
And by the way, the government didn't dispute any of that psychologist's findings. So you know what? If I had to guess, it's foolish for me to guess because we're going to find out the result in about an hour. But I think this judge is going to say, you know what? Let's have that hearing sooner rather than later. He's not going to make a final disposition about what happens in the hearing, but I bet he goes for a quick hearing. One last detail. I tried to Google a little bit about this judge. I hadn't heard of him before today. His name is Martin Chamberlain. Senior guy, obviously pretty smart guy, from Edinburgh originally, if I'm not mistaken. He gave an interview with the Times of London a few years back, sort of up-and-coming lawyer. They wanted to ask him a question. They said, if you could pass one law, what would it be? And you know what he said? He said we should have stronger freedom of speech in the UK. We should have a US-style First Amendment.
Wow.
And
not usual, by the way.
Yeah,
for
I
the
know.
judiciary here in the UK.
And so some of that has to do with Tommy's case, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And if I'm not mistaken, he also weighed in favor of the what's that called? Existence Rebellion, or what's that group called again?
Extinction Rebellion.
That's right. So they're sort of eco-extremists, and you and I might not agree with them, but if this judge is strengthening their right to protest, again, if he's being a principled precedent follower, if he applies that matrix to Tommy, well, maybe he's more sympathetic. If he's a free speecher and a political protest supporter, maybe he's more sympathetic to Tommy. I don't know. You don't want to read too much into it because he is guided by the facts and the law. But the things I could divine about him just by a quick Google, I thought, this isn't a bad judge.
Brilliant.